So after we did our episode with the Hitman and his top 5 records in his collection, I've had many requests to do the same with my collection. Well, your wish is my command. All your dreams can come true here on this episode of Todd's Turntable Talk. Welcome everybody to another episode of Todd's Turntable Talk. And before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone, please, to make sure and hit that subscribe button, as well as the bell notification, to remind you each and every time an episode drops here on our channel. So, my top 5 favorite records of my collection. Well, the problem is I'm such a big music nerd, it's really hard to narrow it down to just 5. So, instead of 5, I'm going to give you 6. I almost got there. I was so close. But there was 2 on the list that I couldn't decide which one should go and which one should stay. So we're going to do all of them. So here is, in no particular order, my Desert Island top 6 albums in my collection right now. We start out with the album that got me into vinyl in the first place and really got me into music. My mom and dad had this on vinyl, and it was the very first album that I can remember listening to beginning to end over and over and over again. That album is Billy Joel's An Innocent Man. This album is very eclectic in the sense that he is doing a lot of different songs in the genres that inspired him. So with songs like Uptown Girl being reminiscent of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, songs like Easy Money being reminiscent of things like Wilson Pickett, and there's also just some fantastic songs on here. An Innocent Man, For the Longest Time, Tell Her About It, Keeping the Faith, so many great hits, but also the album tracks on this record are fantastic too. Songs like This Night, Careless Talk, Leave a Tender Moment Alone. This album is my all-time favorite Billy Joel record, and will always remain in my top records forever. And now for something completely different. We switch gears from the more singer-songwriter classic rock to a lot heavier. And I have always been a Kiss fan ever since I was a teenager, but this album in particular is my all-time favorite album of theirs, and that is called Revenge. I know it's sacrilegious to the die-hard makeup era fans to say that an album from the 90s with no makeup and not complete original band, it's not the same and it's not cool. Well, screw that. I honestly think that this album is one of their absolute best from beginning to end. The songs are just driving. The songwriting is great. The production by the great Bob Ezrin is fantastic. It is a really, really great album. This is the album I put on if I ever just feel like wanting to let loose and rock out a little bit heavier than normal. This is the album that I go to. On the complete flip side of that, we go from New York, where Kiss was from, back to my hometown, but more specifically to Detroit. For me, Motown was always a humongous influence on me as a music lover and as a musician. Motown has always been one of my all-time favorite styles of music. This album in particular was such a prolific album in the label's history, but also the man who did this and wrote all these songs. And I'm talking about Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. This album here is full of so much passion and soul and amazing messages that still ring true today, maybe more now than before when they were released in the first place. Songs like What's Going On and God Is Love, Mercy, Mercy Me, Inner City Blues. It is an amazing album with Marvin Gaye calling in all the troops, all the Funk Brothers, and really, really putting together what I believe is his ultimate masterpiece. This is a reissue, 180 gram reissue that I got probably 5 or 6 years ago. You can still get it today fairly easily, and original presses are out in the wild as well, but I prefer the reissues of Motown stuff because the pressings when they originally came out were kind of 50-50. Sometimes they were great, sometimes they weren't so great. So if you really want to experience the music the best you can, I highly recommend going with the reissues. This is probably one of the more rare albums in my collection, not because the album itself is hard to find nowadays, but the version that I have is really tricky to get. This album is by my all-time favorite band. This album for me, the way they reinvented themselves when they took to the studio to start recording this really, really struck me. And a lot of the songs to this day still resonate with me a lot. And I'm talking about U2's Octung Baby. The reason this version I'm holding in my hand is so rare is this is an original press. This is an original issue from 1991 when it very first released, and it is in pristine mint condition. This album is never played on my turntable. I think I've played it once, so not never, but I don't like to play this because of what it is. I recently, as a gift for Christmas a couple years ago, got the reissue, the 180 gram reissue of it, and that's what I spin when I want to listen to this. But this album is incredible. Some of my favorite songs on it, things like One and Until the End of the World, Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses, Mysterious Ways, Trying to Throw Your Arms Around the World, Acrobat, Love is Blindness, produced by Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno. It is an incredible, incredible record. And this one is probably usually my number one or number two on my list always when someone asks me what my favorite albums are. The original press is really, really hard to come by in a mint condition. If you try to get it, you're probably going to end up spending at least three figures, at least 150, 200 bucks anymore to try and get this. I inherited this from a dear friend who passed away, so I didn't pay that much for it. And it's something that I'll never sell or ever part with in a million years. But if you want to get this, I highly recommend getting the new reissued 180 gram double LP version. Really, the sound quality is incredible and it's a lot easier on the pocketbook. This album here is another album that really got me deeper into music and more specifically wanting to form a band. My dad and my uncle and my mom were all musicians growing up. Mom plays piano and sings, dad plays guitar and sings, my uncle plays guitar. And my uncle's favorite band in the world is Led Zeppelin. When I first heard this album from my parents' collection, I was blown away. And the album I'm talking about is Led Zeppelin 4. This album, for me, is a benchmark for my love of music. To me, this is their masterpiece. This is their essential classic album, and I absolutely love this record. This album, I can't recommend this enough. Beginning to end, a complete immersive listening experience. Last but certainly not least, while we're on the subject of immersive listening experiences, this album I became aware of in around 2012. This album then became the soundtrack to my entire 2012. So much about this album resonated deep in me more than a lot of other records had. And I had just gotten back into collecting around that time. My friend Ashley Peacock told me about this album, produced by Daniel Lanois by Emmylou Harris. And the album is called Wrecking Ball. This album, as far as atmospheric, warm, lush, beautiful production, the songwriting is amazing. Her singing and her lyrics are just incredible. The amount of guest stars that are on this album with her, it is a great, wonderful album. This album was recently re-released by None Such Records when she did the anniversary tour for this album a few years back that I was very lucky enough to get to see. None Such Records is top notch in so many ways. This pressing sounds phenomenal. It is a great album and definitely rounds out my top records in my collection right now. So I hope you all have enjoyed this list. Please, if you are interested in any of these, head to your local record store and check them out. Most of your local record stores, if they don't have them, can order them for you, and you'll be supporting a local business that is really trying to keep the music alive. So thanks for subscribing and all that stuff. We will see you next time on Todd's Turntable Talk.